The transport ship Morningstar docked with research station Kepler-Dawn at exactly Oro 800 hours. Katie Brooks stepped off the ship carrying only a small bag and a sealed case containing her research equipment. She was a quiet woman in her early 30s, with brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and calm green eyes that seemed to notice everything. Behind her came Dr. Alex Turner, a tall man with graying hair who had been her research partner for 3 years. He was followed by Ryan Cole, their assigned security officer. Ryan was younger than both of them, with sandy hair and an easy smile that made most people trust him immediately. The docking bay of Kepler-Dawn was massive, designed to accommodate ships from different species. The walls were a neutral gray color, and the air had a slight metallic taste that reminded Katie of old military bases. She had been on stations like this before, though never for scientific research. "Welcome to Kepler-Dawn," said a human administrator who met them at the airlock. His name was Commander Phillips, and he looked tired. "I hope your journey went well. The Zilithians arrived yesterday, so they're already settled in." Katie nodded but said nothing. Alex stepped forward to handle the pleasantries. She preferred it that way. People made her nervous when they stood too close or moved too quickly around her. As they walked through the station's corridors, Katie studied the layout. The station was built in a wheel design, with gravity created by rotation. The main research labs were in the center hub where gravity was lighter. Living quarters were in the outer ring where gravity felt almost normal. They passed several Zilithians in the corridors. Katie had seen pictures of them before, but meeting them in person was different. They were tall, averaging 7 feet in height with tough gray skin and sharp claws on their hands. Their faces were angular, with small eyes that seemed to look down on everything around them. The first Zilithian they encountered was walking with 2 others. When he saw the humans, he stopped directly in their path. The corridor was wide enough for everyone to pass easily, but he chose to block their way. "So these are the humans," he said in accented English. His voice was deep and rough. "Smaller than I expected." Philip stepped forward. "Commander Vextar, these are the human researchers I mentioned. Dr. Turner, Lieutenant Brooks, and Officer Cole." Vextar looked at each of them with obvious disdain. His eyes lingered on Katie the longest. "This one is supposed to be a scientist? She looks like a child." Katie felt her jaw tighten, but she said nothing. Alex noticed her reaction and moved slightly closer to her, but not close enough to touch. He had learned over the years that Katie did not like to be touched, even by friends. "Lieutenant Brooks is one of our best xenobiologists," Alex said politely. "She has extensive experience with alien artifacts." "Experience," Vextar repeated with a laugh that sounded more like a growl. "What experience could such a small creature have?" Ryan stepped forward, his hand moving instinctively toward his weapon. But Katie spoke before he could say anything. "Enough experience to know that blocking corridors is considered rude in most civilized cultures," she said, quietly. The other Zilithians immediately moved closer to Vextar. The tension in the corridor became thick enough to cut. Phillips looked nervous and started to say something, but Vextar held up a clawed hand. "Civilized," he repeated, looking amused. "Humans lecturing us about civilization. How amusing." He stepped aside, but as Katie walked past him, he deliberately moved his arm toward her. She saw it coming and stepped smoothly out of the way. "Careful," she said without looking back. "You might hurt yourself." They continued walking toward their quarters. Behind them, Katie could hear the Zilithians talking in their own language. She did not understand the words, but the tone was clear enough. "That could have gone better," Ryan muttered once they were out of earshot. "It could have gone worse," Katie replied. Their quarters were in the human section of the station. Each of them had a small but comfortable room with a bed, desk, and private bathroom. Katie's room was at the end of the corridor, which she preferred. It meant fewer people walking past her door. After they had settled in, they met in the common area to review their mission. The station had been built around an ancient alien structure that had been discovered floating in space. The structure was clearly artificial, but no one knew who had built it or what it was for. "The Zilithians have been studying the outer sections," Alex explained, reading from his tablet. "We've been assigned to work on the inner chambers. Apparently there are some kind of inscriptions that need translation." "Who's in charge of the joint research?" Ryan asked. "Officially it's supposed to be collaborative," Philip said. He had joined them for the briefing. "In practice, the Zilithians think they should be in charge of everything." Katie was not surprised. Every report she had read about the Zilithians mentioned their arrogance. They believed their species was superior to all others, especially humans. "What are the rules about physical contact?" she asked suddenly. Phillips looked puzzled. "Contact? With the Zilithians. Are there any protocols about touching?" "Not specifically," Phillips admitted. "Why do you ask?" Katie was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Just wondering about cultural differences." That evening, they had dinner in the station's main cafeteria. The food was standard space rations, but it was edible. The cafeteria was large, with tables for different species. Humans sat on one side, Zilithians on the other. During dinner, a young Zilithian scientist named Kethamore approached their table. He was smaller than the others, though still much larger than any human. "I am assigned to work with your team tomorrow," he announced. "I hope you humans can keep up." Alex started to respond, but Kethamore had already reached out and grabbed Katie's arm to get her attention. His claws pressed against her skin through her shirt. Katie went very still. Everyone at the table could see the change in her posture. She looked up at Kethamore with eyes that had gone completely cold. "Don't touch me," she said quietly. Kethamore laughed and squeezed her arm tighter. "Sensitive, are we? Humans are so fragile." Katie's voice remained calm and quiet. "I'm going to say this once more. Don't touch me." The Zilithian finally released her arm, still laughing. "What will you do if I don't listen?" "Cry?" Katie stood up slowly. She was still much shorter than Kethamore, but something about her presence made him take a step back. "You'll find out," she said simply. Then she walked away, leaving her dinner unfinished. Alex and Ryan exchanged worried looks. They had worked with Katie for years, but they had never seen her like this before. In her room that night, Katie sat on her bed and stared at the wall. She rubbed her arm where Kethamore had grabbed her. The skin was not broken, but she could still feel his claws. She had hoped this assignment would be different. She had hoped she could just do her research and avoid trouble. But some things never changed. Tomorrow, she would have to work closely with the Zilithians. She could only hope they would be smart enough to listen to her warnings. If not, they would learn the hard way why she did not like to be touched. The research lab was located in the central hub of the station, where gravity was about half of Earth normal. Katie found this easier to work in, though she noticed the Zilithians seemed uncomfortable with the lighter gravity. They moved more carefully, less confidently than they did in the outer rings. The lab itself was impressive. It was a large circular room with equipment from several different species. Human computers sat next to Zilithian analysis devices. The walls were lined with screens showing different views of the alien artifact they were studying. Katie arrived early, as was her habit. She preferred to get familiar with new environments before other people arrived. The artifact chamber was visible through a thick, transparent wall. The structure inside was beautiful in its strangeness. It looked like a crystal tree with branches that seemed to grow in impossible directions. "Fascinating, isn't it?" Katie turned to see Alex entering the lab with his morning coffee. He always drank coffee, no matter what planet or station they were on. "The geometric patterns don't match anything in our databases," Katie said. "The Zilithians claim they've seen similar structures before, but they won't share their data." "Typical," Alex muttered. "Any ideas about the inscriptions?" Katie pointed to one of the screens. "There are symbols carved into the base. They repeat in groups of 7. Could be mathematical, could be linguistic. Hard to tell without more data." Before Alex could respond, the lab doors opened and the Zilithians entered. Vextar led the group, followed by Kethamore and 2 others Katie had not met yet. They moved through the lab like they owned it, touching equipment and moving things around without asking permission. "Humans," Vextar said by way of greeting. "I hope you are ready to observe real scientific work today." Ryan entered behind them, looking alert. As security officer, he was supposed to monitor all joint activities. Katie was glad he was there, though she hoped his presence would not be necessary. "Actually," Alex said politely, "we were hoping to collaborate. Lieutenant Brooks has some theories about the inscriptions that might interest you." Kethamore snorted. "Theories from a human? How amusing." Katie ignored the insult and moved to the main analysis console. The symbols appear to be arranged in 7-part sequences. If we assume each sequence represents a complete thought or instruction, we can begin to identify patterns. She began pulling up her analysis on the main screen. The work had taken her most of the night, but she had found something interesting. "Here," she pointed to a section of the display. This sequence appears at the beginning of every group. It might be an indicator like punctuation. Vextar pushed past Alex to get a closer look at the screen. As he moved, his large body bumped into Katie, sending her stumbling sideways. She caught herself against the console. "Clumsy humans," Vextar said without apologizing. "You should watch where you stand." Katie straightened up and moved away from him. "The lab is large enough for everyone to work without colliding. Perhaps humans should learn to move out of the way when their betters are working," suggested one of the other Zilithians, whose name was Drexhan. Ryan stepped forward. "Perhaps everyone could focus on the research instead of who stands where." Kethmore laughed. "The human security guard wants to give orders? How precious." For the next several hours, the pattern continued. Every time Katie moved to examine something, one of the Zilithians would somehow end up in her way. They bumped into her, reached across her workspace, and generally made it clear that they considered her presence an annoyance. Katie endured it silently, but Alex could see her growing tension. Her movements became more controlled, more careful. She spoke less and less as the day went on. The breakthrough came when Katie discovered that the symbols were not just decorative. They were actually controls for the artifact itself. When she activated a specific sequence, part of the crystal structure began to glow. "Remarkable," Alex said, leaning over to examine her work. "How did you figure that out?" "Pattern recognition," Katie said simply. "The sequences match the mathematical relationships in the crystal structure." Vextar had been watching from across the room. Now he strode over to examine Katie's discovery. Without warning, he grabbed her shoulder and pulled her away from the console. "Let me see what the human has done," he growled. Katie went rigid under his grip. His claws pressed through her shirt and she could feel them against her skin. "Don't touch me," she said quietly. Vextar ignored her. He was focused on the console, studying her work. His grip on her shoulder tightened as he leaned forward. "This is interesting," he admitted grudgingly, "though I'm sure there are errors." "Let go of me," Katie said, her voice still quiet but with an edge that made Ryan look up from across the room. "When I'm finished examining your work," Vextar replied dismissively. Alex started to move toward them, but Katie held up her free hand to stop him. The gesture was small, but Alex recognized it. He had seen it before, though he could not remember where. "I'm going to ask you one more time," Katie said. "Let go of me." Vextar finally looked down at her. He seemed amused by her request. "Or what, little human? What will you do?" Katie met his eyes steadily. "You don't want to find out." For a moment there was silence in the lab. Even the other Zilithians had stopped what they were doing to watch. Vextar's expression shifted from amusement to something harder. "Is that a threat?" he asked. "It's a warning," Katie replied. Ryan had moved closer now, his hand resting on his weapon. The tension in the room was thick enough to taste. Finally, Vextar released Katie's shoulder, but instead of stepping away, he moved closer to her. His face was now inches from hers. "Humans need to learn their place," he said quietly. "Perhaps you need a lesson in respect." Katie did not back down. Despite the fact that Vextar towered over her, she held her ground. "And perhaps you need a lesson in listening," she replied. The standoff might have continued, but alarms suddenly began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed and a voice came over the intercom. "All personnel to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Repeat, all personnel to emergency stations." The spell was broken. Vextar stepped back and everyone in the lab began moving toward the exits. As they left, Katie noticed that Kethmore was watching her with new interest. "What was that about?" Ryan asked quietly as they walked toward the emergency stations. "A misunderstanding," Katie replied. But Alex was not satisfied with that answer. As they reached the corridor, he caught Katie's arm gently. She did not pull away from him, which told him how upset she really was. "Katie," he said softly, "what aren't you telling us?" She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "Some people don't listen to warnings the first time. The Zilithians seem to be that kind of people." "And if they keep pushing?" Ryan asked. Katie's expression was unreadable. "Then they'll learn why I don't like to be touched." The emergency turned out to be a minor reactor fluctuation, easily fixed by the engineering crew. But as they returned to their quarters that evening, Alex could not shake the feeling that something important had happened in the lab. He had worked with Katie for 3 years, but he realized he knew very little about her past. Her personnel file listed her as a xenobiologist with military training, but it was thin on details. That night, Alex tried to access more information about Katie's background. Most of it was classified, but he found one reference that made him pause. Lieutenant Katie Brooks had served with the Colonial Marines during the Titan Colony War. She had been part of a special unit that specialized in close-quarters combat in zero-gravity environments. The Titan Colony War had been brutal. The enemy had been larger and stronger than humans, with natural weapons and superior technology. The only way humans had survived was by being smarter, faster, and more ruthless than their opponents. Alex stared at the screen for a long time. Then he closed the file and went to bed. Tomorrow, he decided, he would try to convince Katie to tell the Zilithians about her military background. It might make them more respectful. He had no way of knowing that respect was no longer an option. The next morning brought no improvement in the situation. If anything, the Zilithians seemed more aggressive than before. They had apparently decided that Katie's warning the previous day was a sign of weakness rather than strength. Katie arrived at the lab to find that someone had moved all of her equipment to a smaller workspace in the corner. Her analysis programs had been deleted from the main computer, and her research notes were missing from the shared database. Looking for something? Kethmore asked with obvious amusement. He was standing at the main console, which had been Katie's workspace the day before. My research data, Katie said calmly. Oh, that. Commander Vexistar decided it would be better if the Zilithians handled the important analysis. Your work has been moved to more appropriate tasks. He gestured toward the corner where a small table held basic scanning equipment. It was the kind of work usually given to first-year students. Alex entered the lab just in time to hear this exchange. His face flushed with anger. That's unacceptable, he said firmly. Lieutenant Brooks made the breakthrough yesterday. She should be leading the analysis. Drexhan looked up from where he was working. The human made a lucky guess. Real understanding requires superior intellect. Superior intellect? Ryan's voice was dangerously quiet as he entered behind Alex. Is that what you call deleting someone else's work? Vextar emerged from the artifact chamber, where he had been conducting his own examination. He looked pleased with himself. The humans seem upset, he observed. Perhaps they do not understand how real research is conducted. Katie had said nothing during this exchange. She was studying the Zilithians' faces, noting their positions in the room, cataloging their movements. Alex noticed her silence and recognized it as a bad sign. Katie, he said quietly, maybe we should file a complaint with Commander Phillips. No, Katie said simply. She moved toward the corner workspace without another word. For the next several hours, Katie worked quietly at the small table, while the Zilithians made increasingly loud comments about human intelligence and capabilities. They seemed to think that humiliating her would somehow prove their superiority. Alex tried to focus on his own work, but he found himself watching Katie instead. She had gone very still, the way predators do before they strike. Her movements were precise and economical. She spoke only when necessary and then only in short, clear sentences. The breaking point came just after lunch. Katie had been working on a detailed scan of one section of the artifact when Kethmore decided he needed the scanning equipment she was using. Move, he said, reaching for the device in her hands. I'm using this, Katie replied without looking up. Not anymore. Kethmore grabbed the scanner and tried to pull it away from her. Katie held onto the device. I said I'm using this, and I said move. Kethmore yanked harder on the scanner. Katie's grip was stronger than he expected. Instead of taking the device, he ended up pulling Katie toward him. Without thinking, he grabbed her arm with his free hand to steady himself. The change in Katie was immediate and visible. Every muscle in her body went tense. Her breathing became shallow and controlled. When she looked up at Kethmore, her eyes were completely empty of emotion. Let go, she said quietly. Something in her voice made Ryan look up from across the room. He had heard that tone before, though he could not place where. Kethmore was too focused on the scanner to notice Katie's reaction. Stupid human, learn to share. He tightened his grip on her arm and tried again to take the scanner. His claws pressed into her skin, drawing small drops of blood. Final warning, Katie said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Warnings from a human. Kethmore laughed. What are you going to do, bite me? That was when Katie moved. It happened so fast that most people in the room missed it. One moment Kethmore was holding her arm and laughing. The next moment he was on the floor, clutching his wrist and screaming. Katie stood over him, holding the scanner in one hand. Her other hand was precisely positioned over Kethmore's throat, though she was not quite touching him. "I warned you," she said calmly. The lab went silent except for Kethmore's whimpering. Everyone was staring at Katie, trying to understand what had just happened. Vexitar was the first to recover. He roared something in the Zilithian language and charged toward Katie. "You dare attack one of us?" he bellowed. Katie sidestepped his charge with fluid grace. As he passed her, she did something with her elbow that sent him crashing into a bank of equipment. Sparks flew as delicate instruments shattered. Drexhan and the fourth Zilithian, whose name was Torval, moved to surround Katie. They were both larger than Vextar, and they moved with the confidence of predators. 2 against 1, Alex said, starting forward. "That's not fair. Stay back," Katie said without turning around. "This is not your fight." Ryan had his weapon drawn, but he was not sure what to do with it. The situation had escalated beyond anything he had trained for. Drexhan lunged first. He was fast for something his size, but Katie was faster. She moved like water, flowing around his attack and striking at pressure points that sent him to his knees. Torval tried to grab her from behind while she was dealing with Drexhan, but Katie seemed to have eyes in the back of her head. She spun, caught his arm, and used his own momentum to send him sliding across the floor. The whole fight lasted less than 30 seconds. When it was over, 4 Zilithians were on the ground in various states of injury, and Katie was standing in the center of the room, breathing normally. "Anyone else want to touch me?" she asked conversationally. Vextar struggled to his feet, holding his left arm against his chest. His face was twisted with rage and pain. You will pay for this," he snarled. "We will file formal charges. The station authorities will..." "Will what?" Katie interrupted. "Review the security footage. Interview the witnesses." "Please do," she gestured around the room. "Everyone here heard me warn your people repeatedly. Everyone saw who initiated physical contact. Everyone saw who escalated to violence." Ryan realized that Katie was right. The Zilithians had started every confrontation. They had grabbed her first, refused to stop when warned, and then attacked her when she defended herself. "You're a trained fighter," Vextar accused. "You should have disclosed that." "I'm a xenobiologist," Katie replied calmly. "The fact that I have other skills is irrelevant unless someone forces me to use them." She looked around at each of the injured Zilithians. "I gave you multiple warnings. I tried to avoid conflict. You chose to ignore those warnings." Alex was staring at Katie as if seeing her for the first time. The quiet, reserved scientist he had worked with for 3 years had just defeated 4 opponents who were each twice her size. "Katie," he said slowly, "what exactly did you do in the military?" Katie picked up her scanner and checked it for damage. Finding it intact, she returned to her small corner workspace. "Nothing I'm proud of," she said quietly. "Nothing I wanted to do again." She sat down and resumed her scanning as if nothing had happened. The Zilithians slowly picked themselves up off the floor, supporting each other as they limped toward the exit. As Vextar reached the door, he turned back to look at Katie. His expression was a mixture of pain, rage, and something that might have been fear. "This is not over," he promised. Katie did not look up from her work. "Yes, it is." After the Zilithians left, the lab was quiet for a long time. Finally, Ryan holstered his weapon and walked over to Katie's workspace. "That was impressive," he said carefully. "That was necessary," Katie corrected. Alex joined them, still looking shaken. "Katie, we need to talk about what just happened." Katie finally looked up from her scanner. Her eyes were sad but resolute. "What happened is that some people didn't listen to warnings," she said. "What happens next depends on whether they've learned their lesson." She returned to her work, but Alex noticed that she kept glancing toward the door. Whatever had just happened, she did not think it was over either. And she was right. The Zilithians did not return to the lab that afternoon. Katie worked quietly at her corner station, running detailed scans of the artifact's surface. Alex and Ryan tried to focus on their own tasks, but both men kept glancing at her. "We should talk to Commander Phillips," Alex said finally. "Report what happened." Katie did not look up from her scanner. "The Zilithians will report their version first. They'll claim I attacked them without provocation." "But that's not what happened," Ryan protested. "No, it's not. But who do you think the authorities will believe? The established galactic power or the newcomers who just beat up 4 of their citizens?" Alex had to admit she had a point. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic community. The Zilithians had been a major power for centuries. That evening, Katie was proven right. Commander Phillips visited her quarters just after dinner. He looked uncomfortable and tired. "Lieutenant Brooks," he said, "I need to ask you some questions about the incident in the lab today." Katie invited him in and offered him a chair. She remained standing, which Alex noticed made Phillips nervous. "The Zilithians have filed formal charges," Phillips continued. "They claim you attacked them without warning or provocation." "And what does the security footage show?" Katie asked calmly. Phillips shifted in his chair. "There's a problem with that. The lab security system malfunctioned just before the incident. We have no visual record of what happened." Alex felt a chill run down his spine. "That's quite a coincidence." "Yes," Phillips agreed grimly. "It is." Katie was not surprised. "So it comes down to witness testimony. The Zilithians have 4 witnesses. You have 2. Phillips looked apologetic. "I'm sorry, Lieutenant, but the numbers don't look good." "What are the charges?" Ryan asked. "Assault with intent to cause serious harm, destruction of research equipment, disruption of a peaceful scientific mission." Phillips read from his tablet. "The Zilithians are demanding that you be arrested and sent back to Earth for trial." Katie nodded as if she had expected this. "And what do you think happened, Commander?" Phillips was quiet for a long moment. "Honestly, I think the Zilithians pushed too hard and got more than they bargained for. But what I think doesn't matter. I have to follow protocols." "Which are?" "You're confined to quarters pending a full investigation. The inquiry board will arrive tomorrow." After Phillips left, Alex and Ryan stayed with Katie in her quarters. She seemed remarkably calm for someone facing serious charges. "There has to be something we can do," Alex said. "Some way to prove what really happened." Katie shook her head. "The Zilithians have been planning this since yesterday. They deleted my research, isolated me in the lab, and disabled the security system. They wanted a confrontation. But why?" Ryan asked. "Because they can't stand the idea that a human made the breakthrough discovery. They needed a way to discredit me and claim credit for my work." Alex realized she was right. The Zilithians had been systematically undermining Katie from the moment they arrived. The physical confrontation was just the final step in their plan. "So what do we do?" he asked. Katie looked at both men for a moment. Then she said, "You do nothing. This is my problem." "Like hell it is," Ryan said firmly. "We're a team. Not anymore." Katie's voice was sad but final. "After tomorrow, I'll either be in custody or on my way back to Earth. Either way, the mission continues without me." That night, Alex could not sleep. He kept thinking about the look in Katie's eyes during the fight. It had been cold and calculating, like she was solving a mathematical problem. There had been no anger, no fear, just professional competence. He decided to do some more research on Katie's military background. This time he accessed files that required his security clearance as mission leader. What he found made him understand why most of Katie's record was classified. Katie had not just served in the Titan Colony War. She had been part of an elite unit called the Ghost Brigade. They were specialists in infiltration, sabotage, and assassination behind enemy lines. The Ghost Brigade had been formed when conventional military tactics failed against the enemy. The aliens they fought were stronger, faster, and better armed than humans. The only way to win was to be smarter and more ruthless. According to the files, Katie had completed over 30 missions behind enemy lines. She had specialized in close-quarters combat in zero gravity, where her smaller size was actually an advantage. The war had ended when the Ghost Brigade succeeded in assassinating the enemy leadership. Katie had been part of the team that completed that final mission. Alex stared at the screen for a long time. No wonder Katie did not like to talk about her military service. No wonder she had seemed so different during the fight. The woman he had worked with for 3 years was not just a scientist with military training. She was a professional killer who had chosen to become a scientist instead. The next morning brought the inquiry board. It consisted of 3 officials. 1 human, 1 Zilithian, and 1 from a neutral species called the Vorthan. They set up in the station's main conference room. Katie appeared before the board in her dress uniform. Alex noticed that she wore more decorations than he had ever seen before. Apparently, she had decided to remind everyone of her military credentials. The Zilithian representative, whose name was Judge Kalar, spoke first. "Lieutenant Brooks, You stand accused of unprovoked assault against 4 Zilithian citizens. How do you plead? Not guilty, Katie said clearly. The evidence against you is substantial, Judge Kalar continued. 4 witnesses testify that you attacked without warning. 4 witnesses who had been systematically harassing me for 2 days, Katie replied. 4 witnesses who deleted my research and sabotaged the security system. You have no proof of sabotage, the Zilithian judge said dismissively. Actually, I do. Katie activated a small device she had been holding. A holographic display appeared in the center of the room, showing detailed technical data. This is a complete log of the security system's operation for the past week, Katie explained. As you can see, the system was deliberately shut down using Zilithian access codes just before the incident. Judge Kalar looked angry. Where did you get this data? I downloaded it before they could delete it too, Katie said calmly. I also have backup copies of my research and recordings of every conversation that took place in the lab. The human judge, Commander Sarah Martinez, leaned forward. You recorded private conversations? I recorded everything, Katie said. It's a habit I developed during my military service. When people are planning to betray you, documentation becomes very important. She activated another section of her device. The room filled with audio recordings of the Zilithians discussing their plan to discredit her and claim credit for her discoveries. The recordings were damning. They clearly showed that the Zilithians had planned the entire confrontation. They had deliberately provoked Katie, hoping she would do something that would justify having her removed from the mission. These recordings were made without consent, Judge Kalar protested. They should not be admissible. The Vorthan judge, whose name was Arbitrator Zelan, spoke for the first time. His voice was calm and neutral. The recordings were made in a public workspace during official duties. No privacy was violated. He looked at Katie with what might have been respect. You came prepared, Lieutenant. I always come prepared, Katie replied. The inquiry took most of the day. When it was over, all charges against Katie were dropped. Furthermore, the Zilithians were censured for their conduct and ordered to pay reparations for the damaged equipment. Judge Kalar was furious. This is a travesty of justice. The human is obviously a trained killer who defended herself after repeated warnings, Arbitrator Zelan interrupted. The evidence is clear. Your people initiated every confrontation. After the hearing, Vextar approached Katie in the corridor outside the conference room. His arm was still in a sling from their fight. You think you have won, he said quietly. But this is not over. There are other ways to deal with problems. Katie looked at him with those cold, empty eyes that Alex was beginning to recognize. Commander Vextar, she said politely. Are you threatening me? I am simply stating a fact. Katie stepped closer to him. Despite their difference in size, Vextar actually took a step backward. Then let me state a fact in return, Katie said. If anything happens to me, my friends, or my research, I will hold you personally responsible. And I will respond accordingly. You would not dare, Vextar snarled. Katie smiled for the first time since Alex had known her. It was not a pleasant expression. Commander, she said softly, you have already seen what I do to people who touch me without permission. Do you really want to find out what I do to people who actually threaten me? Vextar stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked away without another word. Alex and Ryan had watched this exchange from a distance. As Katie rejoined them, Alex noticed that her hands were completely steady. She showed no signs of stress or fear. Do you think he'll try something? Ryan asked. Katie considered the question seriously. Probably. Zilithians don't handle humiliation well. He'll want revenge. And if he does try something, Alex asked. Katie's expression was unreadable. Then he'll learn that some mistakes can't be survived. That night, Alex lay in his bed thinking about what he had learned. He was Sato. 3 days passed in relative peace. The Zilithians kept to their section of the station and avoided the shared laboratory. Katie returned to her research with renewed focus, making remarkable progress on decoding the artifact's inscriptions. She had discovered that the symbols were not just writing, but actual programming code for the artifact itself. When activated in the correct sequence, different sections of the crystal structure would respond, revealing new chambers and passages. This is incredible, Alex said, studying Katie's latest findings. It's like the whole structure is a giant computer. Not a computer, Katie corrected. More like a library. Each section contains different types of information. History, science, star charts. The civilization that built this was trying to preserve their knowledge. Ryan looked up from where he was monitoring the security feeds. Any idea what happened to them? Katie pointed to a section of translated text on her screen. According to this, they were facing extinction. Not from war, but from a natural disaster. A supernova was going to destroy their home system. So they built this to preserve their culture, Alex said thoughtfully. A message in a bottle for whoever found it. Katie nodded. And we're the first ones smart enough to figure out how to read the message. The research was going so well that Alex had almost forgotten about the Zilithians. That changed when Commander Phillips contacted them that evening. We have a problem, Phillips said when he arrived at their quarters. He looked more worried than Alex had ever seen him. What kind of problem? Katie asked. The Zilithians have requested a private meeting with you tomorrow morning. Just you, no witnesses. Absolutely not, Ryan said immediately. That's obviously a trap. Phillips nodded grimly. I think so too. But they're claiming it's an attempt to resolve the conflict peacefully. If you refuse, they'll file a complaint with the Galactic Council claiming humans are unwilling to engage in diplomatic solutions. Katie was quiet for a moment. Where do they want to meet? Conference room 7. It's in the neutral section of the station. And you think they're planning something? Phillips hesitated. 3 more Zilithian ships arrived today. They're claiming it's a routine supply run, but that brings their total personnel on the station to over 50. Alex felt a chill. 50 against 3. That's not good odds. It won't come to a fight, Katie said calmly. They want to make a point, not start a war. What kind of point? Ryan asked. Katie's expression was thoughtful. They want to prove that humans can be intimidated. That will back down when faced with superior numbers. She looked at Phillips. What time is the meeting? Katie, you can't seriously be considering this, Alex protested. Actually, I am. Katie stood up and walked to the window that looked out at the stars. We have 2 choices. We can hide behind regulations and diplomatic protests, or we can settle this once and for all. Settling it could get you killed, Ryan pointed out. Katie turned back to face them. Ryan, in your professional opinion, what happens if we don't resolve this conflict? Ryan thought about it. The Zilithians will continue to escalate. They'll file more complaints, bring in more personnel, make the situation impossible for any human research teams. And they'll succeed in claiming credit for the artifact research, Alex added reluctantly. Exactly. Katie sat back down. So we have a choice. We can let them win through intimidation, or we can call their bluff. Phillips looked confused. You think they're bluffing? I think they're testing boundaries, Katie said. They want to know how far they can push before humans push back. Well, tomorrow they're going to find out. The next morning, Katie dressed carefully. She wore her dress uniform again. But this time Alex noticed she had added something, a small pin on her collar that he had never seen before. What's the pin? He asked. Katie glanced down at it. Unit insignia, from my old squad. Alex recognized it now from the files he had read. It was the badge of the Ghost Brigade. A silver skull with wings, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. Are you trying to send a message? Ryan asked. I'm trying to be honest about who I am, Katie replied. They walked together to conference room 7. The corridor was unusually empty, which made Alex nervous. When they reached the room, Katie paused outside the door. Whatever happens in there, don't interfere, she told Alex and Ryan. This needs to be settled between me and them. Katie, Alex started. Promise me, she said firmly. Whatever you see, whatever you hear, don't get involved unless I ask for help. Reluctantly, both men promised. Katie took a deep breath and entered the conference room. Inside, she found Vextar and 4 other Zilithians waiting for her. They had arranged themselves around the room in what was obviously an intimidation pattern. Katie walked to the center of the room and stopped. You wanted to talk, she said simply. Vextar smiled, showing his sharp teeth. We wanted to make you an offer. I'm listening. Leave the station. Return to Earth. We will ensure that your research notes are lost in a computer malfunction, but we will let you go unharmed. Katie was quiet for a moment. And if I refuse? Then you will discover that space stations can be very dangerous places. Accidents happen. Life support fails. People disappear. One of the other Zilithians, a massive creature named Gorthak, stepped closer to Katie. We know what you are, human. We have researched your military record. Very impressive. But you are one small female against 50 trained warriors. Katie looked around the room, studying each Zilithian carefully. When she spoke, her voice was conversational. You researched my record, but you didn't understand it, she said. You saw that I fought in a war and assumed that made me just another soldier. She moved to the conference table and sat down casually. The Zilithians tensed, expecting her to do something aggressive. Instead, she just leaned back in her chair. Do you know what the Ghost Brigade actually did? She asked. Vextar frowned. Special Forces. Commando raids. Katie shook her head. We were assassins. Our job was to infiltrate enemy installations and eliminate high-value targets. We specialized in making deaths look like accidents. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Are you threatening us? Gorthak demanded. No, Katie said calmly. I'm explaining why your offer is pointless. She stood up and walked to the room's environmental controls. With casual efficiency, she began adjusting settings. You see, you're thinking like soldiers. You're planning to use force to eliminate a problem. But I'm not a soldier anymore. I'm a scientist. The air circulation system began making different sounds. Katie continued working at the control panel. And the thing about scientists is that we solve problems efficiently. We find the root cause and eliminate it with minimal waste. Vextar realized that something was wrong. The air in the room was beginning to smell different. What are you doing? He demanded. Katie finished her adjustments and turned back to face them. I'm demonstrating a point. You have 50 warriors on this station. But I don't need to fight 50 warriors. She gestured toward the environmental controls. I only need to eliminate 5 leaders. Without leadership, the rest will follow orders from their superiors back home. The Zilithians were beginning to have trouble breathing. Whatever Katie had done to the air system was affecting their respiratory systems. You're poisoning us, Gorthak accused, though his voice was getting weaker. I'm adjusting the atmospheric composition, Katie corrected. The gas mixture is now optimized for human respiration. Unfortunately, it's not ideal for Zilithian biology. Vextar struggled toward the door but found his movements were becoming sluggish. You cannot. This is murder. This is a demonstration, Katie said. She was breathing normally while the Zilithians were clearly in distress. I could kill all of you right now and make it look like an environmental system malfunction. No one would ever prove otherwise. She walked back to the control panel. But I'm not going to do that. Because I'm not a killer anymore. I'm a scientist who just wants to do her research in peace. Katie reversed her changes to the environmental system. Within moments, the Zilithians began breathing more easily. However, she continued, if any accidents happen to me or my colleagues, if any of our research disappears, if any of us have any problems at all, I will assume that you decided to continue this conflict. She walked to the door, then paused and looked back. And if I decide that you're still a threat, I will solve that problem the way I was trained to solve problems. Permanently, efficiently, without leaving evidence. Katie opened the door. The choice is yours, Commander Vextar. You can accept that humans belong in the galactic community and treat us with respect. Or you can discover what happens when you threaten someone who used to kill people for a living. She left the conference room and found Alex and Ryan waiting in the corridor. Both men looked worried. How did it go? Alex asked. They made their position clear and I made mine clear, Katie said. I think we understand each other now. That afternoon, the 3 additional Zilithian ships departed the station. Commander Vextar filed a formal request to be reassigned to a different project. Within a week, all Zilithian personnel had left, Kepler Dawn except for a small research team led by a more reasonable scientist named Dr. Kether. Dr. Kether approached Katie on his first day in the lab. Lieutenant Brooks, he said politely, I have reviewed your research and I